Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Wednesday. So yesterday we saw Power 96 counting down already to Friday. So we're another day closer to Friday. Well, this morning, a judge has awarded $23 million to a black former St. Louis undercover police officer who was beaten viciously by his own colleagues in 2017 during a protest in 2017. We'll talk about that this morning. And a Gallup survey shows that Black Americans are more concerned about pollution than anyone else. And Nike is under fire for its design of the U.S. women's track and field uniforms for the 2024 Olympics. And the women have a great deal to be upset about with this. And hundreds of taxpayers turned away in Atlanta as the tax deadline approaches after they received notice to come down to the tax office for assistance. And what a disaster down there. Also, and I'm sure my man Power 96 is going to get a kick out of this. Sometimes you have to make fun of yourself or your loved ones. And in this case, the New York Knicks. And what amounted to an epic fail when LeBron James, remember when LeBron James famously hit free agency for the first time in 2010? And he eventually made the quote, the decision. Well, several teams, including the Knicks, pitched LeBron James on playing for them. But my Knicks pitch was a tad bizarre. And I remember hearing rumors about it back then. But now the video of the pitch has been released and it includes a list of celebrities and heavy hitters, including yeah, pre-president Donald Trump. But that's not the worst of the pitch. How about a Sopranos reunion? We'll talk about that as well. But first, a couple of things this morning. Of course, we know that the WNBA draft happened Monday, and there's a lot of course, as you expect, talk about the salary disparities between the WNBA and the NBA. We ran through that before. People have strong opinions about it, um, and so do I. I mean, I don't say they strong. I just have thoughts on it. One way that, in a positive way, believe it or not. I mean, if I'm you know one of the athletes, one of the female athletes, I know I can't put myself in their shoes, but um, they're gonna play 4 months of basketball, and I'm not comparing. Well, I am comparing. Um, they in the 4 months they're going to be paid. These are 21, 20, 20, 20, 21, 22-year old young ladies. Going to be paid about, on average, 80 some odd $90,000 a year. And that's the first contract, the first 4 years. They will be provided um, a car, they will be provided an apartment. And so the total um, compensation, depending on where you live, is going to be uh, probably about $200,000. It's not NBA money by any stretch of the imagination. And all I will say about that is, yes, indeed, if you're going to compare them to the NBA, they are grossly, the WNBA is grossly underpaid, embarrassingly underpaid. But if I'm 20 years old and somebody hands me a contract guaranteed at $90,000 essentially a year, a little over $90,000 when you break it down, a car and an apartment, I'm winning. I'm ahead. I say that only because once again, and people say you can't do that. It's apples to oranges or whatever. Once again, there are many, and they're not coming out with student loans. There are many folks, 20 years old, who wish for 4 months of work, they can get a car, an apartment, and $90,000 a year. So this idea that we should be angry, there are other things to be angry about. Um, People who hate me for saying it, but there are other things to be angry about. Uh, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and others are making uh, and will make millions of dollars in and endorsements and other deals. But I'm not going to I'm not going to s- like protest that these 20, 21, 22 years old are making 90 something thousand dollars, getting a car and an apartment because I know they're going to be making a whole lot more than just that. And at some point, yes, the NBA, I mean WNBA has to do better. Maybe that point people believe it is now. And maybe now with all of the attention because of the Angel Reeses and the Caitlin Clarks, et cetera, maybe now some of these sponsors, because more and more now, more and more they are becoming detached from the NBA. The NBA is they're uh, private owners. And no, what I'm saying, I would say the same thing if they were men. No, that's not true. I believe that the NBA players who come out of college like that, I would not have a problem if that salary structure was the same. Would not have a problem whatsoever. Once again, these are 20, 21, 22. They don't have student loan debt. They got a free education ride. Yes, when I say free education ride, it's no disparagement because they provided so much income to their schools. They deserved it and more. But I'm not going. There are too many other things. How about let's protest the fact that uh, teachers are underpaid, garbage men are underpaid. Let's protest that stuff. If we want to make a fuss, is what all I'm saying. These young ladies, the good thing about one of the great things about this particular class of 2024 with Angel and the young lady from South Carolina who was drafted with her Chicago, these are very intelligent, business minded young ladies who are going to turn that WNBA around. They're going to make other money. The Angels already killing it. And I dare say in a couple of years that pay disparity between the WNBA and NBA is going to start to shrink because more people tune into the Final Four, more people turn into the women's finals, and the draft. The draft got more views than m- almost all the previous drafts combined. People are now attuned to the great sport of women's basketball. And Power 96 says, I have no sympathy for a professional athlete when it comes to money. Tell him or her to come live off my retired military salary. Then we can talk. I served 20 years and I received pennies. And that's how some people feel. And yes, I believe I can't speak for that man down in Louisiana, but I believe he feels the same way about men. I could care less about what athletes and entertainers make, and people put them on pedestals. I don't. As far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't bother me if they were paying Denzel Washington $15 an hour. It would not bother me one bit. But nonetheless, big ups to women's basketball because very soon now with this crop, I do believe that there is going to be a reckoning when it comes to salary. I think they are going to be um, the driving force behind changing everything with the WNBA. Serena Williams talked about buying a franchise. Says she would like to buy a franchise. You can get more independent people, and more have. Like I said, they're now less dependent on the NBA than they have ever been. The NBA is less involved than it's ever been in the WNBA. The television money will now start to flow in the NBA because of the draw that is Angel Reese, that is Caitlin Clark. And they have already, she's still every day, Caitlin Clark is on the front of CNN's um, coverage and in front of NBC's. So they are pushing her, of course. Of course, they're pushing her, but they're pushing her and they're riding this wave. They're talking to her like she is already a professional legend. They're talking to like people who grew up with her. They're having them on their programs and things like that. Her high school teacher, a high school basketball coach, was on ESPN. So the proverbial worm is changing. I'm not hating on them on because their salaries or whatever. I'm not mad at their salaries. Not mad at nobody's salary. That's your salary. That's what you agreed to. And look, obviously Caitlin Clark is not hurting for cash. Ice Cube offered her $5 million to shoot a couple of threes in the Big Three. Play what they play 8 games. So if she was hurting for cash, she would have taken that 5 million. Another note, real quick, is the Reverend Freddie Haynes III abruptly resigned as the president and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition, Jesse Jackson's group.
Suddenly,
Um,
I submitted my resignation as president and CEO because I felt it necessary in light of the huge challenges faced by our community, in light of the challenges faced by this nation and world during this consequential year.
Dr. Haynes also released this statement.
I spent 6 years in Chicago. I know a number of different people. Calls are out. I've already talked to a number of different folks involved. And here's what you have here. And everyone knows this. And this is not breaking news. The reality is Rainbow Push Coalition is all Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. The idea that Reverend Jackson was going to step aside, not going to happen. And so this is really a fundamental question that Reverend Jackson has to answer, his family has to answer, and the Rainbow Push Board of Directors has to answer, because the reality is he makes the call, not the board. They're going to have to make a decision, and that is, how do you want to truly honor the legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr.? Do you want to have a shell of an organization that has leadership that bends a knee to Reverend Jackson and the family? Or do you want to carry forth Rainbow Push further to the 21st century? We've seen.
and so that's, Roland Martin, from what he gathered, that it sounds like either, as Austin says, Haynes was forced out, or he realized that he had no real power, so he stepped out. Um, he was just installed in January. That's what made it so shocking. And so I guess more will come out. And one of Roland Martin's points too, when it comes to Rainbow, is that the organization, it's a pretty much, as Roland Martin put it, a relic. And they are still doing things that, the younger crowd can't get with. And that's a lesson for all of us, right? Isn't that a lesson for for all organizations, particularly Black organizations, to be in tune with what's going on today? The civil rights struggle, well documented, and all the heroes of the civil rights movement deserve their, as they say, their flowers. But at some point, at some point, it's time to give way to a younger generation. I hear what Roland Martin is saying. At some point, you got the young ones today have some fresh ideas that, for the most part, work. Some of them need just a little guidance. They don't need to be controlled. Just a little, hey, you might want to consider this. But for the most part, they got this. If we, the older crowd, allow them to. Because just as much as uh, a Jesse Jackson, a Martin Luther King, a Rosa Parks, whomever didn't want to be oppressed and suppressed, the younger people today don't want that either. And so they are working perhaps as hard, if not even harder, based on what we see, what everyone sees coming, to try to make sure that not only that the ship is afloat, but strong. But we get the older crew, the Jesse Jacksons, the Benjamin Chavises, you got to work with them. But you can't control, you can't say your decision is your decision is final and I'm not stepping aside. I'm not giving them that path. So if you're going to hire a Freddie Haynes, you got to let him work. As they say, you got to let him cook. And it appears based again, now listen, um, Roland Martin has folks in Chicago. He has his claws there, his foothold there. We have our sources in Chicago. I spoke briefly with Jesse's right hand man yesterday, and he said he'd get back to me, and Shelley did not get back to me. I'm pretty sure I'll hear from him today because that's what generally happens. Shelley always gets back, Shelley Davis. But what so what Roland is hearing seems to be is that Jesse won't let go. He won't let go. And if there's going to be a future for the Rainbow Push Coalition, Jesse needs to understand, his family, as Roland Martin said, needs to understand that you got to allow a Freddie Haynes to come in there and do his thing. You got to allow someone to come in there and do their thing. And like I said, it goes across the board. Derek Johnson, NAACP, relatively young compared to most. I thought that was a smart move. He has the energy, and he still has that connection to this generation because he's almost a part of this newer generation. And at some point, even here at the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Chavis will probably, not probably, but at some point, I'm sure he's going to have to decide that it's time. I've done my part because he has. You're going to have to let the young ones cook. And that's where I'll leave it this morning. In news, other news, A St. Louis judge awarded nearly $23.5 million to a former police officer who was beaten by his white colleagues while working undercover during a protest. Luther Hall was badly injured in the 2017 attack during one of several protests that followed the acquittal of Jason Stockley, a former St. Louis police officer, on a murder charge that stemmed from the shooting death of a black man. Now, Hall had previously settled a separate lawsuit with the city for $5 million. In 2022, he sued three former colleagues, Randy Hayes, Dustin Boone, and Christopher Myers, for their roles in the attack. Hayes, he didn't respond to the lawsuit, even though he was served while he was in prison. But the others, the judge issued a default judgment, and Boone and Myers, that case is still pending, that civil case. But Hall just talked about the severe physical and emotional damage that followed the beating. He suffered several herniated discs, a jaw injury that left him unable to eat. He developed gallstones with complications requiring surgeries. His lawyer said that he had to endure this severe beating, and while that was happening, he knew it was being administered by his colleagues who were sworn to serve and protect. He was undercover. They claimed that they thought he was one of the protesters being overly aggressive. They knew he was one of theirs. And according to the lawsuit, the various lawsuits, he was walking toward, get this, toward the police station from the police station he worked at. And these officers commenced to beating him. They ordered him to put his hands up and get on the ground, and kicked and beat him. Now, those officers were indicted in 2018 in connection with the beating. And a fifth officer, Stephen Corte, was indicted on a civil rights charge and another count of lying to the FBI. Boone was convicted of a civil rights charge and sentenced to a year and a day in federal prison. Myers received probation after pleading guilty to a single felony charge. Coletta received probation for lying to the FBI and a grand jury about the attack, while Corte was actually acquitted. So none of them really was punished uh, criminally for beating him. Um, just want to quickly go back before we transition to another news item. Power 96 says that Derek Johnson is one of the few reasons he still deals with the NAACP. And Mike V says this level of dysfunction is not needed in this political climate with apartheid creeping up on us in November. Yeah. And I guess that's why that situation looks so bad. The timing, right? You look at the timing and you see what's coming down the pike. And a quick note, Power 96 says he doesn't believe that there'll be more than one black juror in the Trump trial. Just as a update, 7 have been seated, and one of them is a black woman who has a master's degree in education. She's an English teacher in a public charter school system. She's not married, doesn't have any children. She claims to avoid political conversations, and she says she wasn't aware that Trump is facing charges in other cases. Thought that was interesting. Um, she avoids political conversations, but it seems to me that most people know that this man is facing multiple cases. Juror number one he is from Ireland, married with no children. He gets his news, he says, from the New York Times, the Daily Mail, and sometimes Fox News and MSNBC. So you have a Fox News watcher as the foreperson. Juror number two is an oncology nurse, a native New Yorker who lives with a fiance, reads the New York Times and watches CNN. Juror number three is a corporate lawyer, originally from Oregon. Get nervous when lawyers are on juries. Not married and doesn't have children. Gets the news from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Google. I already don't like that person. Runs an IT business. This is juror number four, for training and consulting. Attended 1 year of college. An older man, originally from Puerto Rico, who is married with adult children and two grandchildren. Told the court that he finds Trump to be fascinating and mysterious, but didn't indicate any strong feelings about his politics. Juror number six, software engineer at a large broadcast company, recently graduated from college, not married and doesn't have children, currently living with three roommates in Chelsea. So that means he got a little bit of money. She gets her news from the New York Times, Google, Facebook, and TikTok. So probably a younger person. And finally, juror number seven is another lawyer, a civil lawyer. How are they doing that? Married with two kids, lives on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. It's not George Jefferson. Said there were likely Trump administration policies he disagreed with. Reads the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Fox News, and the Washington Post. So those are the seven who have been seated. They need 12 for the primary jury, and they are looking for 6 alternates. So that's what today they expect to seat more, if not uh, the remainder. Um, Austin says, I guess, so the one black ain't too bright. The thing about jury selection is that when a person wants to be on a jury, and this is one of those cases where um, they really have to be careful about, because high profile cases like this, and we could talk about OJ, we could talk about Michael Jackson, we could talk about R. Kelly. There's never been a more higher profile case. In high profile cases like this, generally you have to watch a juror who will say anything to get on there, because at the end of the day, they're going to want a book deal. They know that they're going to be in line, I should say, for some sort of book deal, a lucrative book deal. So that's what that's one of the many things they have to be careful about. So it surprises me, though, that there are 2 lawyers so far seated on this jury. And I would imagine, I don't know this, because they're trying to keep what they have a pool reporter that goes in and out of the courtroom. They're not allowing cameras right now at all. Um, but what I really am curious about is who picked who. Who picked whom? Was it which member of this jury so far did the Trump team pick, and which members did the prosecution pick? It's gonna be interesting because they have jury experts. They paid them a lot of money these to read the jury and to suggest, when they have this what they call the voir dire process, to select who they believe would be more favorable to their client. So, or in the case of the prosecution, more favorable to the state. So we'll see. Meanwhile, more Black Americans are concerned about their local exposure to air pollution than other racial or ethnic groups, according to Gallup's new survey, which found that 53% of Black adults are very or fairly concerned about exposure to 4 types of environmental pollution or contamination in their communities. 46% of Hispanic adults and 35% of white adults said the same thing. Black Americans also report higher numbers of being concerned about contaminated drinking water. At 46%, Black respondents' concern is 20 percentage points higher than white Americans. 39% of Black adults are concerned about toxic building materials in their communities compared to the national average of 25%. Similarly, 42% of Black adults are concerned about land and soil contamination compared to 37% of Hispanic adults and 26% of white adults. In general, the survey discovered that adults living in urban areas are more likely to express concern about exposure to local pollution threats compared to people living in suburban areas. Gallup noted that racial differences in the survey are not because minority populations are more likely to live in urban areas, but it's really interesting that minorities of all backgrounds have reported a higher levels of concern than white Americans. And of course, Black Americans have the biggest concern. So again, we're talking about environmental issues, pollution, environmental racism, as Dr. Chavis says. Um, and we know that most of these highly contaminated areas are in communities of color. And so, and yeah, there are cancer alleys, as they say. The latest findings from the Gallup Center on Black Voices indicate that environmental pollution and contamination, I should say, are displacing a substantial number of Black Americans. This is what the researchers wrote. And then they also mentioned that the Environmental Protection Agency also chimed in by noting that historical conditions, this is a quote from the EPA, historical conditions such as segregation and redlining. Because of that, Black Americans are more likely to be exposed to polluted environments. And yesterday, we talked once again about reparations. Segregation and redlining have contributed mightily to polluted environments. Or let me put it a little different, more succinctly, that Black Americans, because of segregation and redlining, are more likely to be exposed to polluted environments. Mike V says he attended a climate tech summit in Kenya in February, and the climate tech industry is a $500 billion business, and Black folks only get 0.05% of that market share of investment. We need more equitable funding. And David says we're more concerned, of course, because the effects are more visible in our communities. So again, um, when you talk about reparations, there's another marker. But environmental uh, injustice, we've been dealing with that as well forever. And in Louisiana, Power 96 says the EPA sued the state, but won, but the federal courts basically tossed the lawsuit. Right. So you would think, again, post Me Too and the environment, that particularly corporate folks would be mindful of certain things. Well, apparently Nike is not, because Nike's Team USA track and field kit for women is needlessly revealing and sexist. Female athletes have said themselves after they unveiled its outfits for the Summer Olympic Games. Um, the images, as you see there, and more made public, show a very high cut panty line triggered lots of criticism from several athletes for what they saw as a decision to prioritize skippiness over function. Colleen Quigley, who's a steeplechaser, said they are absolutely not made for performance. Lauren Fleshman, the U.S. national champion in the 5,000 meter in 2006 and 2010, was even more harsh in her criticism. In an Instagram post, she says, I am sorry, but show me one WNBA or NWSL team who would enthusiastically support this kit. This is for Olympic track and field. Professional athletes should be able to compete without dedicating brain space to constant pube vigilance or the mental gymnastics of having every vulnerable piece of your body on display. She goes on to say women's kits should be in service to performance mentally and physically. If this outfit was truly beneficial to physical performance, men would wear it. She says this is not an elite athlete kit for track and field. This is a costume born of patriarchal forces that are no longer welcome or needed to get eyes on women's sports. Stop making it harder for half the population. Wow, that was quite a statement. Power 96 and Nike went full Freaknik. Tara Davis Woodhull, who is an American who placed sixth in the long jump at the Tokyo Games and took silver at last year's World Championships, reacted. She says, wait. She says, my hoo ha is going to be out. Oh, gosh. And this has been a debate for years about the more revealing outfits for female Olympians, whether it's beach volleyball to gymnastics, because the volleyball thing has been a big issue. Mike V says Freaknik meets the Olympics. He's been hanging out with Power 96. But it's not a laughing matter, though. Um, to outfit the women like this, it makes you, again, like, who is minding the store? Because this has to have go, and it's not just a one person thing. From conception to design to manufacturing, this had to pass through many, many decision makers at Nike. And yet, somehow, it was okayed on every level at Nike. It's and Nike is standing by this. Of course they are. Quigley said that Nike should also offer athletes who make the team custom tailoring to ensure the kit fits perfectly. She says, our bodies are all different, and it seems silly to expect us to compete at the highest level of our sport without a properly fit uniform. David Youngblood says, men are minding their own store. That's why we see the outfits we see. I mean, we're talking about competition. We're talking about athletic competition. And something why is anything else on their minds? It's a reflection. People say it's a reflection on Nike. It's a reflection on society as a whole. And again, it's also about the devaluing of women. It continues. It continues. It absolutely continues. The disrespect. I mean, everything has to be sexualized. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. They will be in Paris, France, competing trying to bring home a medal. That's where they are 100% attention at such a high level. These athletes, that's where their attention will be. But Nike apparently wants everyone else's attention to be somewhere else. Mike B says they want Sexy Red to do the long jump. I don't want her to do anything. The people who designed and gave the okay wouldn't let their daughters wear that, is what Power 96 is. And that's the point. It's like, come on, dudes. It is it's a shame that these young ladies worked hard to get to this level and still have to face such degradation. And Nike, yeah, they responded in a very disturbing way because they're still okay with it, despite the women athletes saying, "Look at this thing." Once again, people talk about protests. Well, the best way to protest is with your wallet. So maybe not buy Nike. Maybe that might be a choice for some. There's some protests going down in Atlanta over some um, shenanigans emanating out of the Atlanta IRS tax office where chaos unfolded. Hundreds of people showed up looking for free last minute help. They were invited there, but many were shocked when they were turned away and told to come back in over a month. Eric Mock told the local Atlanta television station there that they saw all of us here and then they closed early. Lines wrapped around the building at the office, with some people arriving early in the morning in the hopes of getting help ahead of the tax deadline. The IRS has a series of once a month walk-in events to help taxpayers without appointments. And the doors on West Peachtree Street were set to open at 9. But many people said that they had to take off work or bring their children with them to wait for hours in line. A majority of them had received an email or a letter from the IRS stating that they had to verify their identity in person, which is why they went down and lined up. That notification went on to say that their refund was being held until they did so. So naturally, you're headed to the IRS office, and this is what they encountered, what you see in the pictures and video. And many of them complained that, yes, it's a very big inconvenience. All the people told, all the people who spoke to local television stations there said they had to have their identity verified in person. This is what they were told by the IRS. And the IRS said they was going to hold this event from 9 to 4. And one of the problems, according to several residents, that while this line wrapped around the corner and was not moving, nobody from the IRS came out to communicate with them to let them know what was going on. And then abruptly they told them they all had to come back on May 18th. That they got to do better in Atlanta. They got to do better. I mean, could you imagine? And notice the makeup, the primary makeup of the crowd. Need we say more? Need we say more? Well, on a lighter note, a much lighter note. So you remember when LeBron James was first a free agent in 2010? And the whole big thing. I mean, he made a mockery of the whole thing anyway. I mean, it was so badly handled by LeBron James and his camp, his free agency. that year. Then ESPN, of course, played right into it. They broadcast the decision as if this was some sort of you know, life altering event for Americans, when it was only a life altering event for LeBron James. But I remember Mike D'Antoni being the Knicks coach. One of there are two Knicks coaches that I despise. Two that I absolutely despise. And Mike D'Antoni is one. Don Nelson is the other. But Mike D'Antoni was the coach, and they kept telling they were the laughing stock. Power 96 loves for me to say that, I'm sure. They were the laughing stock. They thought they cleared all this cap space. They were going to in the position LeBron to New York. I mean, he was coming to Madison Square Garden. It was the biggest thing, and then it wasn't. We know he went on to sign with the Miami Heat. They formed the Big Three, et cetera, et cetera. Won a couple of championships. But rumor abound about the pitch. And there were some people who had said that the Knicks pitch was pretty embarrassing and they lost LeBron with the pitch. Well, the 2010 pitch video was unearthed. And we have the guys who unearthed the video. So let's take a look. Okay, we gotta rev it up. It's like the old machine. We gotta rev it up. But let me tell you about it as we get it together. It features a Sopranos reunion, Donald Trump and other celebrities, and uh, the New York Post. It was the former ESPN personality Pablo Torre who obtained the video from the Knicks meeting with LeBron James in his camp in Cleveland and revealed some of his contents. His
Let me just ask, like, total running time of
Here
this
we go.
video?
About 10 minutes.
That's so crazy. 10
They made LeBron sit through a class project.
for 10 minutes?
10 minutes of his time.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. They have one chance to convince the most high-profile free agent in the history of sports to come play for a franchise that desperately could use exactly that. And they walk into the room and sit down and they press play on a video, and it starts like this.
Yeah, I'll take it down.
Tony, I'm so glad we moved to New York. Life is so much better now.
Yeah, life's good here, Carl. Even if we are in the witness protection program.
Now we just gotta find a place for your friend LeBron to live. What's he like?
Well, he's a modern guy, but he respects tradition.
Here's something classy on the east side.
Was it big enough? It's going to be entertaining a lot of people in New York.
It's very expensive.
Oh, that's not going to be a problem. You got to find something magnificent. Something there's nothing in the world like it. One of a kind, like he is.
Well, here's a place. It says it gets really loud there. Take a look.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's going to be perfect for him.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is...
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I must say so. And it goes on. The video, the full video, you have Donald Trump pitching New York. You have Spike Lee. And Spike Lee, of course, you would expect. But there's a list of other celebrities that filled out the rest of that video, which those guys mentioned was 10 minutes. And of course, there's Jay-Z's public service announcement. City of Winners. I mean, it couldn't be more cringe Donald Trump in the video says the real winners of the world want to be in New York, which is ironic considering he's in the New York courtroom today on a criminal trial. I mean, Reggie Jackson, Mr. October himself appeared in that video. Rudy Giuliani appeared in the video as well. Chris Rock, Earl of Pearl Monroe, Mark Messier, Mike Bloomberg, Robert De Niro, Harvey Weinstein appeared in the video as well. Harvey Weinstein. I mean, what an unmitigated disaster. And part of the problem with one of the complaints that I remember the Knicks making back then was that LeBron had them come to Cleveland. Usually, free agents go visit the cities and the offices and the arena of the prospective team. He had all the teams, not just the Knicks, but he had everybody go to Cleveland, knowing where he was going anyway, which fed his narcissistic ego. Mike D'Antoni, the despised Knick coach guy, despised probably. I don't know who I despise more, D'Antoni or Don Nelson, but he says we tried to put him in a New York state of mind. Mike D'Antoni has no idea what a New York state of mind is. At the time, he said, "Hopefully, it worked out." I'm cautiously optimistic because he's who he is. How could you have been cautiously or optimistic in any way after such a cringe-worthy 10 minutes of torture? I mean, come on. But proud to say that we are in an entirely different Knicks era. Playoffs start this weekend. Yes, Power 96, I will be in my seats at Madison Square Garden come Saturday for game 1, where the opponent will be determined tonight. The Sixers and the Heat will battle out in the play-in game to see who gets to be dismantled by Jalen Brunson's New York Knicks. So, Power 96 says the Knicks theme music should be the music from the Benny Hill show. Back then, yes. This is a whole different Knick team. We have the Jalen Brunson, who should be the NBA's most valuable player. Tom Thibodeau, who probably will get a lot of votes for NBA Coach of the Year. What a year for the New York Knicks. And now it's time to put a punctuation mark on this year by doing some major damage in the NBA playoffs starting on Friday. It's a big weekend because not only are the Knicks not the only Madison Square Garden tenant that's going to be hosting a game 1 this weekend. I'll be at the Garden for that too. The New York Rangers, and they won the President's Cup for the most points this year, and they have the most wins in team history, 55. And they will be shooting for the Stanley Cup championship. And so I'll be at game 1 there as well. So come by the Garden and say hello. Be glad to have you there. We are glad to have you every morning. Subscribe to the Let It Be Known's YouTube page and hit the subscribe button, and we will send you a thank you on air. But anyway, we appreciate you, and more news tomorrow. We'll see who else is going to be on that jury, Power 96. We'll see who else, if they'll have a second Black person on that jury. They don't want a repeat of OJ, right? And nonetheless, we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Let It Be Known.